Hello, hello, and welcome back to Bearing Birth, a birth story podcast highlighting the emotional impact of birth, the immediate postpartum period, and the years beyond. I'm Sophie, a perinatal mental health therapist.
And I'm Jordan, a doula specializing in postpartum support. Today, we are sharing part 2 of Sophie's birth story.
Woohoo!
I'm so excited to share the rest of your story with everyone. We talked a little bit about, in the last episode, about what it was like going back and listening back to it a year later. I wanted to ask you, where are you today in terms of the processing of your birth? I imagine it's a long process that you're never, like, quote unquote, complete with. I think it's probably something that stays with you forever, but specifically for processing your birth, where are you today?
I feel like Libby used the word sticky, and I use that with clients now too, where if there's something left to process, if it feels sticky, I feel like not sticky anymore.
Oh,
yeah.
That's a big deal. Okay.
I mean, I definitely still feel disappointed in the way that it went, but I feel more like ownership of the birth experience and my contribution to the way that it went and knowing my part. I just feel like my beliefs around birth are much more nuanced, and I'm just open to whatever happens the next time.
I wonder if it's like the parts that you feel you played, if like not having someone else to blame contributes to that at all.
Yeah, I think it's maybe I don't feel like a victim in my own birth story anymore. I definitely did during the time and probably the first year. And now I feel a reverence for birth and my story. I feel respect for it. Yeah, it taught me a lot. And I just want to clarify that using the word victim for me means that I feel empowered to not be a victim to certain limiting beliefs and narratives that I had about my own birth and myself. I feel now more like a survivor of the circumstances that I was in, and I recognize how all these layers of beliefs and trauma and diagnosis played into each other.
That's great. Just for other people who feel like they're in the stage of needing to process a birth, a difficult birth or any birth, do you feel like you, I guess on the scale of letting yourself process birth as things come to actively working to process your birth in the last couple of years, where do you think you fall in that? And like, what advice would you give people? Like, do you think that it's one of those things where it's like you get what you put into it? And I know that a lot of people can't put a lot of energy into processing their birth. And that's what we talk about all the time, is how parenthood is so all consuming that some people aren't able to process their birth. So I'm just curious if it's something that you actively were working towards.
I think time always helps you process things because it creates that perspective and distance, and you have these new experiences that help you integrate. But I do feel like I had a lot of privilege in having a perinatal therapist right afterwards, setting up the birth story processing session with Libby, journaling a lot myself, starting a podcast where I could talk about this indefinitely.
A lot of factors.
Yeah, talking with people. I think I'm a verbal processor, and that helps me.
Yeah.
A little bit of both.
Makes sense.
And my experience will be different from, my way of processing will be different for other people.
Totally.
What do you do when you go through hard things? And that's probably what you'll do. You've always been someone to work things out verbally.
And that's what we want for people for this podcast, and to share like that it's helpful to talk about things and share stories. So
yeah, it's really connecting.
Yeah. It's cool to have that for you. Like, it's cool it feels kind of full circle in like the year of sharing birth stories, and to have you share your birth story.
Yeah, it does. I feel good about the timing of it too. I think it was always pushing it off, right? I pushed it off because I was nervous about putting it out there, but also other people's stories seemed like there was always like another episode to put out. So, but it feels right 1 year later.
Good timing.
Of the podcast starting. Yeah. I just want to say, listening back to, I felt really, like I felt safe at the time with you as being the host and leading me places. And I just want to say thank you to you.
Oh,
yeah.
That's nice.
I felt like you really held space for me, and I feel like you hold space for the guests as well. And you are a great space holder.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah. I feel like that's so nice to hear.
You ask really good questions.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
I do feel that you ask a question maybe that leads me into a place that I would have wanted to go but didn't know how to get there.
Oh, interesting. That's good to know.
Yeah.
It just makes me think of when I texted you the other day to thank you for bringing me into this project, because I do feel like it has given me skills that I wouldn't have learned in any other way. And I have found ways to use that in my life and my work and talking with people and recently talking with someone in particular about their birth story. And I felt a lot more confident in I basically had to suddenly hold space for one person to share their birth story in a way that that's not what I was expecting out of this interaction. And I felt so much more prepared than I ever would have in that situation if you didn't ask me to do this podcast. And it's really
it's our
special.
podcast now.
Yeah, I know.
For doing it together. Yeah.
Well, thank you too.
Yeah. Some content warnings for this episode, and they're the same as from the previous one, are high blood pressure, preeclampsia, an unintended hospital stay, transfer of care, the PUPPP rash, and an emergency C-section. And I also want to just add in there that this episode includes a lot of themes and strong bias and feelings against the hospital system. So listen at your own risk.
Okay, please enjoy part 2 of Sophie's birth story.
Okay, bye-bye. A doula and a therapist are sitting down to talk about birth. A doula and a therapist are sitting down to talk about birth. And I think at like 4 a.m., I have this sensation of this popping feeling and then a gush of water. And I was like, oh, something's happening. I felt so excited. And I stood up and I got into this position where I'm like on my knees. And it's like, that's the imagery that I had of like how I would give birth. I'm in my own body. There's nobody there. These things are happening that I'm excited about and I'm intrigued by it. And so the water like continues to come out and I'm just like, yeah, cool. It's happening. And Johnny's like freaking out like, oh my God, what? And then I remember the smell was kind of weird, just sort of earthy, and then everything is drenched. You know, the bed that I had made. So much water came out.
Wow.
And a little bit of blood. But I was excited. I took my pants off. I was like naked, didn't even care about these strangers. I was just like, yes, this is happening. It's go time. But of course it's not go time because there's still days between that happening. So I get comfortable again, put new pants on, I think, get dried off. And then I think they come in and check me to see how they had done that a few times, like a cervical check to see how dilated I was. And it was maybe like 1 or 2 when I first got to the hospital and would just slowly move up, which was really discouraging, but also like, of course, you know, like this is not happening to me naturally. So I understand why this is not.
If I were at the birth center, I'd be fully dilated.
Yeah. Or, you know, it takes time. I just remember saying like, why are we in a rush? And they're like, well, they want to get it done as fast as possible, you know?
Did they express that like you were put on like a time limit now that your water had broken for infection reasons?
And so I had waited I waited until 4 a.m. on the 12th to, or the 11th to about 4 a.m. the next day.
Just like out of curiosity. Johnny left at like 6 a.m. and then like came back pretty quickly. And then like during the day is when you were napping, or was it like the next night you were trying to sleep?
Yeah. Or no, sorry. During that night, we like went to bed.
The Saturday night, the 12th?
Yeah. Wait. She was born on the 12th.
Oh, okay.
So maybe it was the 10th. It was like 2 days before the C-section. We were there. Tried to delay it as long as possible. And then after the water broke, I just became more and more stressed, I think. And then into the evening that night, I think I'm getting a lot of details wrong. My brain is quite foggy now looking back. But I remember after the water broke, we put water in the tub, we set things up, put music on. And I started they did want to give me Pitocin. So I waited as long as I could until they were like, yeah, no, now we do need to start this. And that, I think, could have waited longer. There was no legitimate reason other than let's start Pitocin because you're here and that's just the protocol. Did
they start it because your water broke?
I can't remember that part. Probably Johnny would know. because he took notes of everything during the whole time.
Oh, wow.
I don't know where those ended up, but I just know that there were things that didn't need to happen in that order. It's like they do this and then your body reacts, and then they do this and your body reacts, and that's the cascade of interventions. And I wanted to prolong every single thing, and because I wanted to do that, I felt like they probably talked about us in their nursing station about how irritating we are to help and attend to and take care of, because everything they would say, there was pushback. And it wasn't that we were mean or rude. It was just, why is this necessary? Can you give us the reason why? And a lot of the time, the answer was, this is just the way things are. And depending on the nurse, there would be a little nurture or just nothing at all. It's just like, this is what we do here, and so this is what we're going to do. And that's it. And then you're just like, okay. And then we would talk for a bit and then have them step out. It was very much just like, we're together and no one else. We're fighting against everybody somehow.
It's hard. I mean, I know that I would feel that way about, they're definitely talking about me out there. But like in this situation, like you needed that control. And I think that that's fair. And it's fair to ask these questions. And it almost makes it feel validating to ask the questions when the answer is, that's just how it's done. And that's the answer. But it's hard. I mean, it's hard for people to advocate for themselves in that situation. And then it's especially for someone who like cares if they're out there talking about you, but you just have to like put that aside and focus on yourself.
Yeah.
And I know, I mean, in the little bits that we witnessed what was going on and seeing how Johnny was acting, and how you described things that happened, like it was definitely clear that he was doing the best he could to advocate for you and your family. It
was really hard on him, too, to have to be the only one. Like, I'm really grateful. I have never seen him advocate so much in a course of a few days like that. I felt really cared for by him, and it was hard on him though too, because he's such a gentle person, and you're not mean when you advocate for yourself, but there's this grip that you are, like people it's this interpersonal tension that happens every single time, and that can weigh on you and build over time, and it's traumatic. It was traumatic for him, and to watch me go through all of that, and him too, and it's also his child, and things are happening that there's no reason for. And they also don't disclose everything to you. And we're people who want to know everything. And we would hear, okay, we want to give you this medication. And then we'd go Google it to see what the research says, and that it was just wanting too much control, not having any support, and figuring out how to cope with a diagnosis in the moment, in real time, and be the best advocates. And I think it really did set us up for parenthood in the end, because we worked together like never before in a way. I mean, yeah, we do well together, but it was like we're in crisis together for the first time. So
you got Pitocin.
Yeah, so between getting the first Pitocin dose and somewhere after my water breaking, that was like maybe just a few hours of this extreme pain building up. These contractions that I have never felt so much pain in my body ever before. It's like your body breaking in half. I felt it a lot in my back. And I remember trying to get into this position where I would put my hips forward as far as I could, almost like I just couldn't.
To like get away from
To get
pain?
away from it, yeah.
Was it like suffering?
I was suffering so much. I just wanted to get out of it. And I enjoyed the contractions at first. And I was like, wow, like this is what I've been imagining this whole time. And this isn't so bad. I can take some breaths in between and I can do this. I'm in the tub. And then I thought that the warm water would be really pleasant for me. It ended up being too overstimulating. Like I didn't like the warmth and wanted to be out. And I remember sitting on the toilet for a long time, looking in the mirror, looking at myself, just like, you've got this, you can do that. And that makes me feel a little emotional now, because I've had to be there for myself in my life a lot of times. And I just wanted in that moment to be like, in the end, I ended up going through it myself. My body went through this. I survived this. And maybe I didn't need the support. I don't know how to formulate that thought. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I'll leave that one there. But it got to be way too painful. And I remember banging on this metal thing over the bed, and like biting whatever was in my mouth at the time. And I was just in agony. It was like torture. I felt like I was being tortured. And they also turned the Pitocin up without asking me. So they come in and turn it up every few hours to get things going more if your body doesn't respond. Each person takes a different dose to affect the contractions.
To have the necessary contractions.
Yeah, and I just would make me angry. Like, you're doing this thing without asking me. Like, you need to ask me before putting things in my body. I was also, really scared of getting an epidural, and I didn't want that, and thought, then I'm not my mom. Because she did it without any medication, and if she can do it, I can do it, and I don't need anything to disrupt my own body's natural way of doing things. And I remember saying, just give me anything, help me, please, put anything into me that would make this go away. And they did fentanyl and then the epidural. And I remember the anesthesiologist came in and they were like, he's going to ask for your consent for this now and explain the risks and benefits to you, which was great. That's cool. That's the first time that's happened. And I was like, just put it in.
You're like, suffering now.
Yeah. And you have to sit really still to get the epidural put in, but you're in agony and being tortured. And so Johnny had to like hold me in this position where I couldn't move so that, it doesn't end up paralyzing you or going in the wrong way. But once it got put in, everything went away very quickly, and I could catch my breath and just chill for a few hours and get a little bit more rest. I wasn't sleeping, but I could be calm. And it was like this warm blanket that went over you. Yeah, you can't move your legs at all. They're just lifeless. It's bizarre.
So weird.
Yeah, going between two extremes. Mm-hmm. And then after that, you can't eat anymore. So all the lovely food that you and Sasha brought, I asked you guys to bring like bone broth and dates and, all these delicious, nutritious food. And I remember like asking for this nice kale salad. Didn't eat any of it. We had to throw it away because Johnny doesn't eat kale salad. It's so sad. But then I ended up eating, the only thing they would let me eat is this artificial pudding. Or what is it called? Jello. This like orange Jello. And I just remember asking Johnny, like, please give me more Jello. Like, at that point I had just resorted to being in this situation. I'm going to eat the Jello.
You're like, this is what I got.
This is what I have. And then I think we were in that situation for like a day. Because once you put a numbing, it controls pain, then the contractions slow. So they have to give you more Pitocin. And the whole time you don't feel what's happening. It's just on this monitor that's connected to your body telling you what's happening. And then we got to a point where I was 9.5 or so, 10 centimeters dilated, and it's time to start pushing. And I remember being really scared again, like, okay, this is the time now that I have to push. We started pushing and I didn't feel anything, but it was more of this head tension and this extreme focus, which I don't even really remember this at all. There's no emotion around this part. It was kind of an hour long of just a very rhythmic breathing somehow, and like holding my breath and pushing and counting. And Johnny would help me, and we had our foreheads together, and it was kind of like, in the movie that you see. That was a fun moment again where we were together in control.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wonder if you don't recognize emotion in that moment, because it was like the one time you were literally doing the work. You were in control. Yeah. You had a task. So you could focus just on that. Like, this is me trying to give birth.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Where my autonomy isn't taken from me. I am in my body doing something, even though I can't feel what's waist down. I'm counting, breathing, pushing, or so I think I am. But I do that for an hour, and Ruby is like, they can feel her head and see her hair. And then at some point they are like, okay, we need to do a C-section. And I was like, what? Like, what? We're
That's
almost
surprising
there.
when her head is there.
Yeah.
Not what you would expect.
I don't know why the change was made, but they made it seem like the baby's in distress. And I'm like incoherent really at that point under so many drugs that I don't remember.
And days of sleep deprivation and stress.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, we're not even at the actual birth and the postpartum part yet. So then they basically decide that the obstetrician comes in and she looks at me very sternly and she's like, your baby, we need to do the C-section because your baby is at risk or something like that. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's true actually, but I just remember being talked to like a child. I'm making a bad decision and like this doctor needs to come in and tell me what the right thing is to do.
Do you think they were like trying to express the urgency?
Probably. And I think even to this day, I just don't think it was necessary. Mm-hmm. But then again, I also don't know enough about preeclampsia and what's really happening in my body. I don't know. And there's some things that I don't have that expertise around, like somebody who's doing surgical procedures and knows more. Mm-hmm. So we grieve and cry, and then I'm tapping out entirely. I'm going to put on my eye mask and my earplugs, and I'm basically not in my body anymore. I don't.
In the operating room?
Yeah, between being rolled from the laboring room to the operating room, I didn't see anything or want to hear anything. That's how much I didn't. Scary. Well, it was comforting to me than seeing all these people around me and lights and then
more hospital experience.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, so then we go into the delivery or the, operating room, and I can feel a lot of pressure and people talking and doing things, and it does feel very rushed. And there's the anesthesiologist again who put the epidural in. He was the only person who checked in how I was doing, and I think he has a job of just monitoring to make sure that I'm getting the right amount of medication in the moment. But he had the free time to talk to me in that moment. And so he's like, hey, you're going to be okay. And I asked him, I feel that. I still feel you guys. Because I was so nervous about feeling the knife. And he's like, they've already cut you. They've already gone in. And then I remember, oh, that's not so bad. Okay, all right. And then my teeth were chattering quite a bit from being so scared. I was actively in this trauma response of being in that situation. Everything's kind of blurry because I can't see anything. I'm just going off of sounds now. So then Ruby gets pulled out and I can hear Johnny. They ask him to announce the sex of her because we didn't know at the time. And he's paused and couldn't figure it out right away because, they're all scrabbled up. You can't really make it out. And then he's like, it's a girl. And then that was the best moment of the whole time because we were really, really happy about that, to know who she is. And I had always sort of had a feeling that it was a girl.
And she's here.
And she's here. Yeah. Yeah. And then I took the eye mask off because I wanted to see her. And that was also a really, really profound moment. I saw myself looking back at me. It was really weird. And then from that moment, I just wanted to hold her the whole time, never let her go. Yeah, but then I couldn't hold her because I was still cut open. And Johnny took her, and I don't really remember what happened from there because my teeth were chattering so much and I was just overwhelmed and crying. And I remember Johnny said, I don't remember this as if it was happening, but he talked about how he held her in a position or held her where her neck, her breathing was cut off. So she turned blue, and then they had to take her from him. And that was pretty traumatic for him because he felt like he had done something to hurt her or something. So they took her away, and then he watched her being rubbed a lot by 4 different people. And there is a video of that. The anesthesiologist took really amazing videos and photos of us then.
That's so nice.
I'm really grateful for that too. Yeah. Because otherwise I wouldn't know what had happened. Yeah. I couldn't put things together. Mm-hmm. And then I felt pretty alone but I wanted him to be with her. And so I'm just in the middle of being sewn back up. And then we get rolled into this recovery room. And I felt confused as to why we were in this new room and not where we had come from. But they have to monitor me and the baby. So we were there a few hours and we watched the sunrise on the 12th. And I was just holding her and got to nurse her. And it was just really like the three of us survived and we're all together. And she was healthy. And yeah, I see that picture in my mind. And then we went to another room. And I'll just go through that really quickly. I didn't sleep. As soon as I got back to the room, I had a moment where I first had to go to the bathroom. And this is what my birth story processing session focused around, that moment. Because I had gone to the bathroom. I couldn't really walk. I was in so much pain, but also numb, and dizzy and just like disoriented. And Johnny was with Ruby. And so I had a moment to like go by myself, but I needed support. And so this really kind nurse took me over there to the bathroom. And as soon as the door closed, I just started to sob. And it was like everything that just happened came to an end. And I was finally alone and on the other side of it. I am no longer scared to anticipate birth, but it's behind me now. And I also felt a sense of relief. Okay, now I can rest and recover and just be with her. But also it was when the complete devastation and grief like all just hit me at once. And she held me on my shoulders and just said like just really kind things like, "It's okay, honey." And I just felt really nurtured by her. Yeah, so I took a moment to just be with myself, and then I went back in. And I was also under this magnesium. They give you magnesium after you have high blood pressure to help it regulate and come down. And I was also on a lot of different pain medication like oxycodone. I didn't want to continue taking that because it goes into the breast milk. And so then it was just like ibuprofen. And then I was also on blood pressure medication. And just so many things happening to my body throughout those 4 days remaining recovering there. And I was mad that I couldn't just go home right away, but we had to recover. And I know now why, because it's major abdominal surgery, and I don't even know how I would get downstairs. I don't know. We're getting there.
Yeah, don't stress.
Why does it take me so long to do this story? I'm impressed that people can get through their story in such a quick amount of time.
I mean, I think like an hour and a half.
Only?
I think, yeah. I mean, it's a little longer, but we do want to publish this. You don't have to use all of it. Yeah. And I think this is big for you. I mean, this is the reason you wanted to start this podcast. Yeah. So it's not really surprising that like your story takes time. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And I think it's better for you to have like to say all the things you want to say, even if you don't use it all. Yeah. And even if that takes longer, then.
So important things about the postpartum recovery period in the hospital is that there's different nurses coming in and out, checking each shift there's a new person. And with each new person is a new personality, way of caring for you, gives different advice, whether that's with feeding your baby to just everything. And it was like this confusing whiplash experience. And all I wanted to do was just not talk to anybody. And eventually I told Johnny, I can't talk to anybody else, and they don't need to come in and measure my blood pressure every hour. They can come in every few hours, like, please. So I could just be with my baby and not be disturbed. I really wanted that postpartum. That was also taken. Like the birth experience went very differently, but then also those first few days, I couldn't sleep next to her, which I really wanted to. She was in this elevated plastic bassinet, and it just felt so wrong to have her in this like rolly cart thing halfway across the room and not on me. And the times that I did break the rules and put her on me to have skin to skin and nurse her and just hold her, they would come in and remind me gently, oh, you should get some sleep, and put her in the bassinet, and we just don't want her to roll off. And I just felt the whole time that my intuition as a mother and how I wanted to care for, like, it's just a liability for them. But to me, it's nurturing my child and getting to know her and creating the bond that we've had this whole time. Something that's kind of funny and gross and maybe TMI is that after you have a C-section, like just your whole digestive system is has to reroute itself and like everything just needs to figure out where it's connected to again somehow. And there was so much gas that built up within my intestines that couldn't really get out. Like you can't fart the way that you're used to. And you're also in pain, your abs hurt and can't really move well. So I literally had to ask my husband to move my one butt cheek so that I could release a fart. And like, that's the lowest of the lows. But it is, if we're so bonded after this experience. And it just was so nice to have someone do that for me because you can't do it on your own. Yeah. I really learned the lesson of relying on somebody else, you guys, to help with cats and relying on, the people bringing food. I don't accept help easily. And I remember in the hospital worrying so much about, oh my gosh, I've burdened Sasha and Jordan so much with having to care for our cats. And every time I would ask you guys to bring something, I'd like Venmo you guys right away. Yeah. And it was just so hard for me to let other people take care of me, even though that's what I wanted, but I didn't know how to merge those two feelings.
Mm-hmm. It's hard. It's so hard. It's just like a society problem. But like in our case, we were so excited.
I know.
We were like, oh, we get to help.
And I know that now being on the other side, yeah. I'm so eager to help other people. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I couldn't believe it at the time.
Yeah. Well, we tried to tell you.
I know. It just felt like a burden.
Can I tell a fun, like, small story from when I was in the hospital room with you?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
We've talked about it, I think, but so we visited you, and I think it was hard because Sasha and I really wanted to come in the room together and just like sit with you.
Yeah.
But we couldn't because of COVID. And Johnny was in the room, so you could only have 2 visitors at a time. So we each took turns. And this was when we met Ruby, and it was so cool. But you could tell that you had like been at war, But it's kind of a funny story.
Yeah.
And sweet. So I'm in the room and we're talking, and suddenly there's this like bright flashing light. It's like some sort of like fire alarm, like an alert, something's wrong with someone or something. And in the hallway, you can hear loud alarms going off. But in the room, I think it was so apparent that it was so bright because you had the lights off still, because you're still in your like Zen bubble.
We kept the lights off the whole time we were there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it is like alarmingly bright, flashing light. And you're just like, like another thing, like, come on. And without any hesitation, Johnny stands up and rips his shirt off and covers the light so that it's not like flashing in your faces.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow, he did dedicated and he's like on alert to like solve any problem as quickly as possible. And could he have picked up anything other than his shirt? Yes, but it was the quickest possible thing to him that he could cover it with. And I was just like, wow.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah, he has been really, really protective of both of us, especially during those like first few days and then carrying into the first like month or so. And then, you get into your groove and that starts to, you trust that the baby isn't like as fragile anymore. Mm-hmm. But it was really, he really came through for us. Yeah, I remember he would make me a really nice breakfast in the morning.
Once you got home?
Yeah. And take care of everything, wash everything. And there were times where I, having been used to being the one doing those things, and I enjoy doing those things, and I wanted to do them again, but I couldn't. And he would have to get angry with me and say, you need to rest. You need to sit down and not do anything. Like, just take care of Ruby, Mm-hmm. And he really took care of me and us. Yeah. Seeing you guys there, that you came twice or 3 times. Well, you came once when you were
laboring.
And you brought us food. Mm-hmm. And it was just so nice to see you guys. Because it felt like, like family. Like, people I know. The outside world is here.
Yeah, the outside.
Yeah. And then the food that you guys brought. Because the food in the hospital is just truly not conducive to healing. I don't understand how that food is even allowed to be given to people who are either recovering. There is no nutritional value whatsoever.
Yeah,
it
makes 0 sense.
Yeah. A few more things. the light. So we had created this environment that was dark in the room, and there were candles pretty much the whole time, those little electric candles. And every time someone would come in, they'd be like, oh my gosh, it's so zen in here. It's so peaceful. And it gave me this impression that nobody does this, which is strange to me, because why would you want to be in a room that's super bright fluorescent lighting? Clearly there's no doula here doing their magic, like where's the knowledge that you need to be safe to heal? And it was odd. What else? So I couldn't sleep after the C-section at all, and really much the whole time that I was in the hospital, really. But the only restful time, so I asked Johnny if he could come into the bed with me and then bring her to me so that it was like a double spoon situation where you're just kind of all holding together, and I could just relax into that. I felt safe in that. It also felt at any moment anybody could walk in, and it's just such a private, intimate moment, where we're just all there holding each other. And yeah, you just don't have any privacy they just walk in. Maybe they knock and then they come in, but they don't wait for you to say, yes, come in.
That's hard. You needed to be held.
Yeah. And breastfeeding was so hard in the beginning. I almost gave up. I really pushed through, because it was one thing that was, if I can't have the birth experience that I wanted, I have the power to try to push through this, how difficult breastfeeding is in the beginning. It's these snapping little teeny tiny gums that go over your nipple that's never experienced that kind of sensation before, or at least I haven't. And yes, they have that sucking reflex, but you have to learn how to put the breast in their mouth, and holding them is sort of awkward. And I ended up learning the football hold, which was really helpful. And so because I was in such distress, and also because your body takes a few days to produce colostrum first, but then you have your, mature milk come in, I feel like it may have taken longer for me because I was just in such distress. And so they ended up giving her another person's milk, which I was grateful for, but also upset about. I wanted to be the first person to feed her from my body, but she took that and drank that really well. And I also ended up pumping a bit of colostrum for her and putting it into some vials that the hospital kept cold for us. This was after I had been in the hospital for a little bit. I took the pump and started to see if I could get labor going on my own. And that was really, really cool, seeing myself produce milk for the first time. I accidentally had it on the highest setting and it just shot out, and I was like, wow, that's awesome. I felt really proud of my body. There's a picture of me just holding this vial, like this little teeny tiny drop. I think I sent it to you guys.
I think so.
But
it's like small moments of redemption. Like you have control for pushing, like you have colostrum, your body produces that. You have one nurse who like actually comforts you and nurtures you. Like those little things, I feel like probably helped you get through.
They did, yeah. Yeah, so what else here? Almost done. So the rash lasted 8 weeks. It was horrible agony. It robbed me of a lot of peace and joy and being able to enjoy that postpartum experience, because, it would flare up and all I wanted to do was itch it. And so it would create this internal sense of rage, and it would cause me to have to get up and go put antihistamine cream or whatever that is on it. And no one could tell me how to fix it or make it really go away. They just recommend topical creams, and you're just sort of suffering. And then I wouldn't help myself if, when I would go take a shower and just run hot water on it, it was like the most pleasurable experience ever, just running this scalding hot water. For a moment, it would create temporary relief. But as you know, that's the worst thing that you can do for a rash, because then it just spreads. And I think I kept it going for myself, but sometimes I didn't have the strength within me to not itch.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
And you're recovering from major surgery, and you're keeping a new baby alive and learning how to have a breastfeeding relationship and becoming a whole new person. It's hard with the background of itching. I became allergic to UV and would get rashes on my body that would last like days, not even weeks.
Are you still allergic?
I have to be
Wow.
careful. Living in Portland, it's fine, but like it like digs into your soul because you
Yeah.
just have to live your life being itchy
Yeah.
in like places
It's
you can't
horrible.
reach, even, you know, like even if you could scratch.
I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, truly, because it's agony. Like,
And it was similar. They were like, we don't know why this happens, but it's going to be with you for the rest of your life.
oh,
And
I'm
I was just like,
sorry.
are you kidding me?
Oh,
But
man.
I mean, it's been fine since then. I haven't tried to go to a place with high UV index.
Yeah, but it limits you from being able to go do stuff like that.
But I empathize.
Yeah, you know, like I'd rather go through the C-section again than to have
gosh.
that rash.
That's
I turned into a
telling.
miserable person, rageful, like angry. It's horrible. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to you.
When you go to San Diego, do you have to wear like a lot of sunscreen?
It's been okay. Yeah, I have like special sunscreen now too that seems to work.
Oh, good.
So fingers crossed that it just like, that's my saving grace. It doesn't work for everybody, so I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
So it's been okay the past couple of years.
You have a lot going on in your body.
But I haven't gone through postpartum and all of that on top of a lot of things.
That's very, yeah, it's forever in a way, some ways, but also the extreme physical recovery is also very temporary. Mm-hmm. Having a lifelong, where you don't know when it's going to end, that's a really frustrating part of it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, weeks of the rash. Oh my gosh. You said 8 weeks?
8 weeks, yeah.
How long of that was after birth?
So the rash came 2 days before the birth.
Oh, okay.
8 weeks later.
Wow.
Yeah. Coming home was amazing. You know how a lot of people say, oh, they let us walk out of this hospital with this baby? Like, what do we do now? It's the opposite for me. I felt finally I get to choose what to do with my baby and my family and my body. It's
huge.
Yeah.
After that many days.
Yeah. I felt really excited to come home. And the first thing he did when we came home was put Ruby on the couch and had the cats come and slowly sniff around and introduce her to them. And then we ordered our favorite pizza and we made things nice because we had to leave right away, you know, before we left. And yeah, you guys had put the welcome baby sign, and that's still up to this day. Like the little balls.
The little balls.
Yeah, and that was so nice. That's those small moments of like this big thing happened to you, and you know we don't have family here in Portland, and you know we came back feeling really held with the meal train, and lots of people wanted to check in on us with FaceTime, and we got to like show off this perfect baby. I thought she was perfect anyway. Still think she is.
It feels so huge that like you made it home and like you had control back and like you could pay attention to your instincts and make your own choices and like be a triple spoon hug for as long as you want without anybody walking in and like eat the food you want. It's just so...
It's everything.
Yeah.
Being able to have freedom to choose and to have options. It's everything. Yeah, I feel really, you know... I just think about people who don't have that on a daily basis and aren't used to that freedom. And that's just so traumatic. I don't know how to have that chronic trauma is really problematic. And that's what really motivated. Like I was rolled out of that hospital, got into the car and was driving home and just kept thinking birth matters. Like this event is really important. So much. Like, wow, this isn't just a simple little bodily function like I had told that therapist. I'm so glad that I set that up for myself because I scheduled with her a week or so after and just she really helped me grieve and process through. And I remember talking a lot with Johnny and journaling and just thinking a lot and crying a lot.
Processing.
It's intense, yeah. And I feel much more at peace with the whole experience. I'm really grateful for how it turned out in the end because without going through that, I think I would show up very differently as a therapist for clients who experience birth trauma. And just being a parent too, I am able to empathize so much more and to get over myself, you know, like I've learned I can't control everything. I just can't. And that's also what Libby helped me with too, because it's very limiting to me. It seems on the outside being able to control things gives you freedom, it actually limits you in a lot of ways. It's very rigid thinking, rigid possibilities.
Yeah.
So
you mentioned one thing that you would do differently if you had another baby is, trying to let go of some of that control, or like the need to have all the information, and lean more into feeling your feelings. And is there anything else that comes to mind that you would definitely do differently the second time?
I would absolutely save up to have a doula there. Yeah, because it's not only for me, but also for Johnny to give him a break too. And so that he can support me in ways that the doula can't, or that I want him to be able to.
Yeah.
What else? Open yourself up to accepting help. We need help. This is not something we can do on our own. It's great if there's somebody out there who has been able to do it entirely on their own. I don't believe that that's true, but we need help. Accept help. It's okay. Because then you'll be in a season where you can offer help back. And that's what community is. Yeah.
Those are big ones. Do you want to talk any more about your postpartum experience at home? Do you want to, I'll leave that up to you, if you want to go deeper into that, or how your breastfeeding journey continued, or we can ask the last questions whenever.
I'm really glad that I stuck out how hard it was with breastfeeding. I think it was so hard because I had that rash at the time. So my body was just itching. And I was recovering from abdominal surgery. And it was so hard to sit up at times and go pee. Just everything was
your core
hard.
At all.
Yeah. And then having this little snapping turtle there were times where it would bleed, and it just hurt. And one thing I would really, really recommend is those nipple shields, the silver nipple shields. Those were amazing. You put a little bit of breast milk inside, put those on, and it made a difference within a few hours. But then I'm really glad that I stuck it out, because now it's been such a bonding. I feel so much joy with nursing her, and it's really, there aren't a lot of words to describe how amazing it is. I don't want to stop nursing her, even though it can be hard. The responsibility is just on me, which I've created it to be that way. I'm aware of, Johnny could help with pumping milk, and and now she's over a year old and she's eating more foods. And so as we're sitting here recording this, it's been about 2.5 hours now. And in the beginning, it was very difficult for me to be the one who nursed her around the clock, because that was important to me, and to hold her and to, basically have her attached to my body all the time. But it's also because I valued that and wanted that. And we have a really sweet, trusting bond now. And we have this big queen size bed and then a twin next to it. And he sleeps on the twin, and she and I just sleep cuddled up all night long. And I thought sleep would be one of the hardest things for me. How am I going to get enough sleep? Because, I am somebody who needs a certain amount to really thrive in the day. And that's one of the least of my concerns throughout this whole postpartum journey. I get quite good sleep, and that's on Ruby being a great sleeper, but also I think on safe co-sleeping and nursing throughout the night. And she just rolls over and attaches in the dark, and I don't even know how she finds it, but it's just so instinctual somehow. It's really amazing. Yeah, it's been one of the best parts about being a parent, I would say, nurturing her. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. What else? Find a project. It was hard for me to go from being go, keeping myself busy, working a lot, to having, I'll say it is all consuming having a newborn, but there are times when it's really boring, where you're just for hours holding a sleeping baby. And as you know by now, it's really hard for me to just be without my anxious thoughts going, or the need to do something to feel productive. And so that was hard for me. That was a big learning adjustment, and it still is. And that's why we created this podcast too. I very much needed it for my own mental health, to be able to even bring Ruby here and sit down and think about something else and do something else and feel like I'm a human being that's not just a mother. It was very important for me. And now having a balance of seeing clients again and working and spending the day with Ruby, because I'm at home with her most of the day. And that's important to me too. And it's a good balance now.
Yeah. I think that's important.
Okay. I think that's everything.
Yeah. Feel good? Well, we've asked these last 2 questions that we ask every guest to lots of guests, but now I'm going to ask you. Do you feel ready for that?
Yeah, I do.
They're not that much pressure. I feel like you kind of answered this question already, but what advice would you give to someone who's about to give birth? You gave some good advice in the last little bit, but if anything else comes to mind.
It's not so much about building up the nursery and getting all this stuff. It's about what you already have, how you can nurture yourself and your baby and your family and being creative, because your whole life changes overnight. And it's like probably around 6 months in, I realized, oh, I'm just trying to get my old life back, or like to find myself again. But that's impossible because my whole life is different. I can't go back to that person, but it's trying to find creative ways to find myself again in a new way. And I'm still me. I always thought I'd be like a completely different person after giving birth. I've changed a lot of my views on things and I have a whole new identity in a lot of ways, but I'm still me, like with my sense of humor and needs and like strong narratives about myself. That's still all very much there. And so, less on things, more on what's inside.
Yeah. I think that's good advice.
You need good burp cloths. You need good support. You need a meal train. The silver nursing, if you choose to breastfeed or chest feed, those are great. Yeah. And a partner or person that can be with you and hold you and give you meals, and just while you care for this baby or babies, someone's caring for you. And then that person needs care too. It's just, I realize like the value of community. Yeah.
Definitely.
And depending on others.
Yeah. And feeling comfortable asking.
Yeah. Get over yourself.
Okay, the last question is, what's something that makes you laugh about either your birth experience or being a parent?
Being a parent.
I'm honestly so surprised you haven't like prepared for these questions.
Well,
but I'm happy about it.
So I always thought about what I would say for the funny one. But it changes so quickly. Every day there's something new that is funny that happens. What comes to mind is what I already told you with Ruby. She sits on the little cat bed, where they sleep, and she'll just go crawl in there and then start meowing. And she thinks she's a cat. And she's like, meow, meow, meow. But every day there's something. It's more so, I don't find anything funny about my birth experience. I'm grateful for it, and also trying not to dismiss how very traumatic that was and difficult. It's not traumatic for me today, but it was at the time. And things could have been different, and things were the way that they were, and hard for me. And that's okay. The duality is there, very ripe there. Nothing funny about it though. But there's tons of things that are funny about nurturing and raising up a little human who's learning about the world for the first time. It's hilarious, actually. It's like I've never laughed so hard sometimes. And then to laugh with Johnny together, it's just, really wholesome somehow. Yeah.
Yeah. You made it here.
Yeah.
Come so far.
Yeah, and I would do it again, Everything that happened, I would do it again if I knew on the other side there would be another little Ruby. But of course, no one can replace Ruby.
It would be someone else.
Person. Yeah.
Well, that's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for...
It's now like dark outside. We're in the very dark room.
Thanks for like going into all the details and talking it through with me.
Was there anything new that you learned that surprised you, or?
I don't think so. I had like bits, and Sasha and I had like bits and pieces of the picture, and they were so small. So there's a lot that I didn't know.
Yeah. How was it being host? You did a great job. Yeah. I was like just talking to my friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How was it for you?
In the beginning, I could tell I was trying to block things and distract by going into details. And wanting to articulate myself a certain way because I edit these things and want to sound a certain way, but I'm also at the same time trying to be more in my body and not care how
Yeah.
I sound. But it's hard. It's like
hard.
something I'll struggle with my whole life, I think.
Yeah. And you'll have to go listen through it and edit it.
Gosh,
and
yeah.
I'm sure that will be a challenge.
I'm almost inclined to want to like put the editing off onto you or Sasha because I'll be so nitpicky,
Yeah.
I think.
I feel like that's what I pictured as
Yeah.
like overthinking.
I think I want to try it because I want to have control, of course. But then I also, if I recognize I'm becoming too controlling, I'll hand it off to you guys.
Okay. You can also like take it over time and like do a little bit, and then it becomes a lot. Take a break.
Yeah.
Come back to it. No, it was great.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll think of things that you wanted to talk about that you didn't, but I think that's with everybody. And I think it'll be good to have.
Okay, thank you so much for holding space for me. Yeah.
It was great.
I wonder when I'll ever share it from start to finish again. I don't know if I will.
Big day.
Like in such detail.
But now it's recorded.
Yep.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Hi, so this is a little bit later after we've recorded the intro to my birth story, and I'm sitting down with Jordan and we're looking over my medical records from the birth, which is something I have not done yet. And it's been pretty interesting to read over that. I learned quite a lot. And what I was specifically looking for was why I needed to have an emergency C-section after pushing for an hour, because there's a part in the story where I admit I don't know what happened, you know?
Yeah, which I think, did that feel like a gap in your story?
Yeah. I think I
sense.
had this belief of I was just a victim to the cascade of interventions and not that there was something really significant happening and like a severe diagnosis of, I mean, it says all the data is there that connects me to gestational hypertension and then preeclampsia.
Which is a big deal.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's like, who is the character in that show
in Downton Abbey? Sybil.
Yeah, she died of preeclampsia.
That was like the first thing I learned about that show before I ever watched the show, because I had a friend who kept being like, is this the episode where Sybil dies?
Yeah. So I'm glad, I'm glad that I had access to the modern medical care, despite all of its limitations and issues that I still have. I see that there's a time and place.
Of course. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. I'm so grateful for that.
But that's something that you have to process for your own self in the time that it takes to process that.
Right. It just feels really validating to know that there was a legitimate reason for moving me into the direction of a C-section.
Yeah, totally. What did it feel like to go through your medical records?
Yeah, I sat down a couple nights ago and I'm sitting down and showing you, and I was a little frustrated with seeing how many drugs were in my body at one point because I had no idea what I never really consented to. There's like 15 different substances that are just continuously flowing through my body. But then I'm like, well, maybe these substances kept me alive and kept my kidney functioning. What was interesting was why I had to have the C-section. And what I learned was that I had something called pre-renal oliguria, which Google defines as a condition that occurs when there is a decreased blood flow to the kidneys, resulting in low urine output. So I'm guessing that means pre-kidney failure. So it feels validating.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally understand why that would be validating, especially if it was just sort of like a big question mark in your story of like, well, I just had to be rushed into the C-section like people are. What does it feel like now having this extra puzzle piece?
I think I came to a feeling of peace before figuring that out, but seeing it right there on paper feels just really validating.
Yeah.
So anyway, I hope that's mostly for me to make sense of there was like a gap there in the story. So figured that out. Wanted to include it.
I think that's nice to share because it could be a way for someone else to sort of fill in the gaps of their own story if they want to go down the route of reading their chart. And of course, nobody has to do that if that doesn't feel right to them.
No,
but
you don't have to.
It's an option.
Yeah, it's like 50 pages of notes for that throughout the whole story, whole hospital stay. It's interesting to read notes that providers write about you.
Yeah.
And I did see a theme of how I really tried to advocate for what I wanted And I feel I'm proud of myself for that.
That's
and
good.
I imagine I was pretty difficult, but it's okay.
It's okay. Yeah.
It's my birth. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah. And thanks for listening. If you got to the end, thanks so much for tuning in. Okay. Bye. Bearing Birth is available on all major podcast streaming services. We invite you to subscribe as well as follow us on Instagram at Bearing Birth Podcast.